I'll just start. What I was thinking is, because the group is quite small, I think we have two options. One would be I'm doing the traditional talk and I'll share and then we have a discussion, or we could use these beanbags and sit in a circle. So maybe we can vote, like who wants to sit on the beanbag, because they've been here all day and then nobody uses it. Who wants the beanbags? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so everybody wants traditional talk, yeah? I mean, so I thought I can sit on the carpet here, like the magic guru, and then, okay? Can try something new, right? So everybody come to the front and sit on the beanbags? Because they paid for the beanbags, I heard, and they want to use it. Yeah, well, then I will just stop. Yeah? If you fall asleep, I stop. Okay, so not everyone wants the beanbags. Good. Okay, so let's see how it works with the beanbags, because I thought we'd do a circle discussion, but now some people stay there, so we'll make a mix. So what I want to do today is to share a little bit about my experiences building a company, two companies actually, without bosses. So I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm quite a lazy entrepreneur. That's why I wanted to sit down also. And I always try to let other people do the work. So from a young age, I think in my DNA that I want to delegate stuff. I see one of my kids that is 10 right now also has the same behavior. So he tries to delegate tries to delegate everything to his little brother. And I think in a way it's a good behavior, because as a leader or as a manager, I think it's good to let other people do the work, right? You need to make sure that you set the direction, you create accountability within an organization. You need to make sure that everybody knows what's expected and how they're going to be rewarded. But in general, you want to do as little as possible. At least that's my personal opinion. So in my two organizations, I've used a lot of Agile stuff in the first 10 years. I started my first company in 2005. And then since 3 years, I used a lot of the principles in Teal organization. Does anybody know about Teal and reinventing organizations? Only you? That's good. So I can share some new stuff today. So I'll share a bit about my background. Oh yeah, by the way, if somebody wants to see the slide deck, I'll put it up at the end of the talk as well, but you can download the slide deck. And this Ekipa Reinvented document is kind of our Bible for my second company, Ekipa. So it describes all the principles that we use to be a self-organized company without a boss. So you could download that. So I want to share a bit about my background, and then I will share what I have tried in my first company, Bridge Global. Then I share a little bit of reinventing organizations, so you can put things into perspective. Then I share what I tried using the principles of Teal in Ekipa, and then we can have a short Q&A, or a long Q&A, if you're still awake. So about myself, I'm Dutch. I think, is anybody else Dutch? No? Yeah? Oh yeah? Cool. You don't look Dutch, but... I'm thinking when you start talking, maybe the accent will reveal it. That's what I usually think. But so, yeah, I mean, Holland looks like this, but usually it's very gray. Not many places that look like this, so the climate is quite shitty, I think. Yeah. So that's why probably both of us live in Southeast Asia, because the climate is better, and I think people are also a lot nicer. Like Dutch people you're probably an exception, but Dutch people are very direct and harsh and blunt sometimes. My first company is called Bridge Global, so it's a software engineering company, and most of our engineers right now are in India. It's about 100 people. And since 2015, I have a CEO running the company, so it's kind of all self-organized, at least from my perspective as a founder. Because in 2016, because he's managing, Krishna, the CEO, is managing the company quite well. I moved to Bali with my 3 kids and my wife. So I took them to, actually the idea was to do a 1-year experiment. So we thought, let's go to Bali and then put the kids in an international school, see if they like it, and if we like it, then we'll stay. So that's like 3 years ago. So the experiment worked well, and we tried to extend it on a year-to-year basis. Has anybody been on Bali? See a lot of Dutch go there. Yeah. So I think Bali is quite good because it is, on one hand, it's a tropical paradise, and at the same time you have a lot of expats, there's a lot of international schools, there's a lot of things to do. So I started surfing also. Surfing is kind of tiring, so you need to be in good shape, so I try to exercise every day, but I also found, like when I moved to Bali, I thought I can go surfing every day and not work too much because the company is self-organized, so the income is kind of secure. I don't need to work necessarily, but when you get to that point, it's also quite boring. You know, some people retire, but I think it's kind of, you don't do anything, you get bored. So my entrepreneurial blood brought me to start a new company called Ekipa, and the company is established in Jakarta because in Bali there's no business except hospitality and tourism. Ekipa means team in Polish. It sounds a bit like équipe in French. Some people are French here, I think. I can hear it. Why are there so many French people in this conference? You don't know? Oh, okay, it's quite interesting thesis. Maybe because Palo IT has a lot of French people. Huh? I don't know. So Ekipa helps companies in Indonesia and since 1 year also in Singapore to do agile transformations. So we got basically 3 pillars. One is IT agile. So most agile starts in IT departments. So we do coaching and transformations and trainings in IT. Second pillar is more around business agility. So some companies get to a certain maturity level in IT agile and then try to expand it beyond IT to make, for example, agile in marketing or agile in HR. And some enterprises even do it like completely. So they try to do cross-departmental agile where different people are sitting together in squads. So we have people from marketing, sales, IT, and they all work together towards a common purpose. So that there's not many companies doing that yet, I think. Maybe in Singapore it's slightly different, but Indonesia is a bit behind with Agile. And the third pillar is more around innovation. So we help companies to run innovation programs which basically create corporate startups within an enterprise. So we try to encourage intrapreneurial people to come up with product ideas, form teams, and then run their own startups. So one of the big companies in Indonesia is Telkom. We're trying to help them with running that type of program. So those are the 3 things we're doing. So my first company, Bridge Global, I did a lot of stuff because I started in 2005. And while preparing for this presentation, I was thinking back what kind of enabled me to run a bossless organization, to live in Bali while the company is run by itself. In the early stage, I started developing core values together with the first people that I hired. And I think I heard a talk from Charles just before in Online Pajak. And he said he skipped this in the initial phase. So when he started Online Pajak, there were just a few people that didn't think about core values or the purpose of their company. And he later got into trouble. So I think if you start a company, it's quite important to define this. And they have evolved over time, so it's not that we had these core values from the beginning, but they were somewhat similar. And I think from these 2 core values really enabled a culture that creates a lot of responsibility with people. So the first one is entrepreneurship. We used to call it responsibility. I think if you try to reinforce entrepreneurship with people continuously, you get people that take more accountability. So for me, who could explain what means entrepreneurship? Just short thoughts. What's entrepreneurship? Nobody. You're entrepreneurial.
Solving a problem in a new way.
Solving a problem in a new way, yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, so it's mainly about problem solving. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think most people think about entrepreneurship like somebody like me who sets out, quits his job, then starts a company and then builds a startup. But I think it's more like a behavior. Yeah? So people, indeed, if you have a blocker, like entrepreneurs have to go through a lot of challenges, right? You try to create something that doesn't exist yet, so you get a lot of blockers, and then you try to find ways to go over it or under whatever. It doesn't matter what path you take, but you want to solve the problem that you face. Yeah? So I think this is something which can be described as a behavior within any type of company. Right? So it doesn't need to be only about taking risk of quitting a job and then starting a new company. And I think this helps to make people aware that, yeah, if I do a job, no matter what my role description is, I need to make sure that I create outcomes, that I solve problems, and that I get my job done. The other one is openness, and I think this is also a very Dutch kind of value. Like in Holland, people are very open and direct in their feedback, sometimes very blunt, which I think is kind of the flip side of being open. But I noticed in Asia, and I've been working with people in Asia since 2007 or 8, I think. In Asia, openness is not very normal in most cultures. In India, where I've got about 100 people, it's not that common. People don't openly share when they have a concern with somebody else. And in Indonesia, it's somewhat similar. So people they're not used to giving feedback. And I think if you want to organize, if you want to have self-organized teams taking accountability for certain projects or for certain outcomes, you need to make sure that people are open to each other. So if I work in a team and I deliver services to a customer and I get delay or I get some problem, if I'm open about it and communicate to my customer about this, then we can align and we can solve the problem when it appears. But if I'm silent and I keep everything inside, then it might suddenly explode after a few weeks. Similarly, in conflicts between people, if you have a team that self-organizes and there is no sort of team lead or boss within the team that tries to solve things, you need people to be open to each other to identify, okay, I'm not accepting the behavior you have shown to me in this in this project that we're doing. So we can actually discuss this and solve this for the future. So I think openness is a very important value to create a self-organized culture. I think everybody knows this diagram. This is a Scrum overview of Agile. So in trying to create more self-organization without bosses, we started implementing Scrum in 2011 for the IT teams that we have. So initially, we were doing a lot of waterfall projects with fixed price and deadlines. So the client would be, for example, in Sweden, and then the team was working from India to deliver software to that client in Sweden. And if you have a fixed price, waterfall-based project, it's very challenging to deliver that. I think we just had a long talk about remote collaboration. So it makes it more challenging if you don't use Agile or stuff from Agile. I believe that Agile, as Scrum especially, helps to create alignment if you do remote or distributed collaboration, because it has a sort of inbuilt communication rhythm. We have much more transparency because we have things on sticky notes or Jira boards, so it's much easier to align. So that helped to make the IT teams that deliver services to a customer more accountable and autonomous in delivering those services. Then on the management side, I started using this method. Does anybody know this one? You read a lot of books, I think. So this is an American guy, Vern Harnish, who wrote this book called Rockefeller Habits. He rebranded it into Scaling Up now because his audience is mainly companies that have passed the startup phase but are not big enterprises yet. So he tries to help entrepreneurial companies to scale up, to grow. And at the core of his method is the one-page strategic plan. And we started using this in around 2011 or 12, mainly for the management, for the people in the management position. I'll share later on what we did with management positions, but at that time we still had the role managers, so there were still sort of bosses within the company. So what this tool does is it gives you a framework to define your long-term goals. So you describe your values, your purpose, your mission on the left side, so the first two columns. And then you translate it into goals for the next 3 or 5 years. So what are the things we have to accomplish in 3 to 5 years in order to realize our long-term plans? And then you translate it into 1-year goals, quarterly goals, weekly goals, and daily goals. So it has a little bit of long-term military planning in it, because it talks about long-term goals for 3 to 5 years, which in the current agile environment is not what we're normally trying to do. But I think if you use those goals more like dots on the horizon or directions that you're trying to pursue, it helps to keep people focused and then to translate it into concrete, tangible action plans for management roles. So we had a company plan like this, we're still using that, so we have a company plan of where we want to be in the next year, in the next quarter, and then we translate that to individual people, and they have their own management accountability plan, stating what they're going to do to accomplish the company goals, how they contribute to this. So I also think that an important element to make a system like this work with accountability is to have a good salary system. So what we did is we started thinking, okay, how can we make sure that if developers, engineering teams work directly for a client, that they deliver services to the satisfaction of the customer. If you have people who just execute and they'll get their salary no matter what, you get less of a sort of feeling I'm responsible for the outcomes that are delivered to a client. So we decided that we create a new salary system, and this is only for the engineers that we have. And every year in April they get a salary appraisal, and this appraisal is based on facts, on data. And basically there's a number that is generated through these percentages, and that number decides on the salary. Yeah? So there is no HR manager or any team lead or project manager who subjectively decides for a specific person what is the salary that you get extra this year, but the system decides on this. So somebody could not agree to it, but there's nothing we can do. It's a kind of fact. So throughout the year, you have an influence to change how your salary goes up or down. It doesn't go down, by the way, up. But it's up to you. So 50% of the number that decides on the salary appraisal is decided by customers. So if I work in a team directly for a client, then every month the client will give feedback to the team or the individual team members. And 50% of my salary appraisal depends on that sort of number on a scale of 1 to 10 that I get from my client. So I have a direct influence on the satisfaction of my customer. Yeah, so every month it's kind of a form that we send, and the feedback that the client gives goes to HR and also to the individual developers, so you can see it. Then 20% is based on the billed hours. So we don't want people to sit on the bench and not bring any profit into the company. So we also see if somebody is performing well, he makes his customer happy, it means that 12 months he gets invoiced, and it has a positive impact on the salary increment that he gets. And then the remaining 30% is a mix of like professionalism, which is about communication, attitude to work, how do you come on time, how's your coding quality, for example. It's a mix of that. And then every person also has a mentor. So I don't know exactly how frequently they do it, but every developer has a mentor who gives 360-degree feedback to that specific person. Some teams do it also 360 within the team, but usually the mentor gives feedback to the mentee and vice versa. And the feedback from that is also used to a small percentage to decide on the increment. If anybody else has questions, then just, no? To be honest, I don't know, because actually I asked last week, can you give me the update, and they changed this apparently. I didn't create it, so I don't know. They gave me a form, but if you want, I can send it after the. Yeah, and then so the CEO, after I gave the rein to him, created kind of a new structure. So what we did last year, he fired the COO, because earlier on we had CEO, and then the COO was managing the operational side. So operations is like the delivery teams working for customers. So he fired the COO, and then also the HR manager, who was kind of a strong person on the HR side, was also sort of asked friendly to leave. So this doesn't look like the traditional pyramid that you have in a company. And what we try to do is like on the operational side, all the teams are self-organized to deliver the value to the client. So they also self-select the team members that they have in their team. If they need extra people, they can ask for extra people to HR, and those people can start recruiting. But they eventually decide by themselves who they get in and also who they fire. And I think that's an interest. I'm pretty sure it would be very hard to do things that I describe in a, whatever, few thousand man strong company. Like if you work in a big multinational, it's probably not that easy. But what we do in our company now is the team members can fire somebody else. So the team itself will try to monitor the performance of the team members, and if they're unsatisfied about someone, then they'll give a warning. They do it another time, and if it happens again, third time, then the team will tell the team member that they have to leave. So what they do then is to ask HR, can you please fire the guy? And then HR just does the documentation. So there's no manager that comes in to fire the person except for the official stuff. Say again? So it depends on the client, but in total there's about 100 people in the company. Most are engineers. I would say 80 or 85 are engineers, and then we have some people working in sales and marketing, finance, HR. No, it's on the team level. Yeah, so for example, if this is a team working for one client and the red guy is not performing, then they can fire this guy. And nobody else has a say on this, then they can decide on that. Yeah, so within the operational teams, most of the clients are like long-term, so we don't do project work, but only what we call dedicated teams. So they keep working for a client until the client says, okay, I want to remove somebody or I want to add somebody. And the teams also have an influence on that. So they also try to kind of grow the number of team members if the client indicates that we need more people, scale up and down. And if a client cancels, then they will start working closely with sales and marketing to see what could be the next client that our team could be working for. I mean, I want to switch. I mean, they can. I mean, what we always try to do is to have it as open as possible. So I think the first thing that could happen is they start talking to the client themselves. So because maybe the guy wants to have some additional technology, which means that the client could give him different types of work. So the first level to solve it is to talk to the client. And if that specific client doesn't have enough opportunity, maybe within the teams they could switch. But the most important thing we always try to do is that the client hires a person, right? So we want to make sure that the discussion with the clients happen, because we feel that they are working for that specific client, and if suddenly somebody would leave and we decide on that, it might sort of bring friction with the customer. So that level is always very important. Say again? People's. Why? No, why not? Why? No, I mean, so what we try to do is that a team like this works long term for one customer, right? So the client feels like it is my extended team, and we want the client to feel that it's basically his employees. They're not, but we want everybody to feel as much as possible that it is true. So even performance appraisals or feedback can be done with the client so that they have kind of influence on somebody's career path within the team. And if somebody needs more technological challenges, we'll always see can he work in another company or in another team. To be honest, I'm not too involved into the day-to-day activity, so I don't know if this happens in reality. But I think in general it's about conversations. You know, if you start talking to people and you explain this openly so I think if I'm a client of that team and suddenly somebody is moved to another team, I would be very unhappy. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, but again, it's a dialogue, right? We can discuss. If you're my client and I'm unsatisfied with part of my role, I could talk to you, and then based on our understanding, we could decide, okay, I could go somewhere else, or you give me some other work. So that's what I always try. So they're empowered to talk to that client without, I mean, normally you would say, okay, that guy needs to first go to a salesperson or a project manager, and there's a few layers in between to make sure the client doesn't get unsatisfied. I don't believe that that is the way. So we try to encourage that open communication. Yeah, so for sales, what we try to do is we call it crew now. I didn't come up with that term, but we have some people in marketing and sales that are dedicated to marketing and sales. So they do only that. But as you can see, there are also people from the operational teams that could voluntarily join the marketing and sales crew. So they could kind of, if I'm without a job, but I'm kind of interested in whatever, running Facebook ads, that I could join that marketing and sales crew and do part of my work with the marketing people. So for the system that I showed is only for the operational guys. We don't have a system yet for the supporting jobs. So that's still kind of subjective. It's a good question. I should ask the CEO how he is doing that, because I think they have developed some system in the last 2 years. But. Second. In the sense that they will ask HR to put up a job ad somewhere, but for interviewing the candidates and selecting, it's up to the teams themselves. Now we sometimes also add people that are not within the team yet. They are kind of to be hired in the future. I think that's still decided by HR together with some representatives from the teams. There's always tech guys involved in. So I don't know the exact thing, but I think this started evolving about 6 months ago. So it's quite kind of fresh thing that sort of happened by itself. So I think 2 or 3 people have been fired in that way. But I know my CEO is also trying to create a new system now to kind of map people on like behavior and performance. So we try to see to what extent do people fit the values that or the behavior that we want them to show within the work, and how much do they perform, so that we kind of get a system for all the teams to rate people on certain skills to make the decision whether somebody fits or not easier. But again, we try to make the decision making kind of democratic, so it's not like a boss firing somebody because his KPI is not met. Yes. Yeah, so for the supporting roles, I also don't know how we're doing it, but for the operational role, it's based on the thing that I showed. Yes, yes. No, so this is to show like 50% of, so there's a number that comes from the system. I don't know exactly what the algorithm is, but there's a number, and that number decides what percentage of salary increment he gets, and 50% of that number is decided by the client. I could actually give you the form that they sent me last week, which is the details behind the salary system if you're interested. In my brain, I was actually going to skip most of the bridge stuff, but you guys have more questions than I expected. Because I wanted to share more around the stuff that I'm doing in Ekipa right now. But anybody else has more questions? Or 30 minutes? Okay. But what we could do is that for some of the questions, just drop me an email, and I'm going to give the answers to that later on. Okay, so reinventing organizations. This guy wrote this book. This is Frédéric Laloux. He looks like a very friendly guy to me. I think that the other author I showed is more like a business guy. Like he's an American, driven to make performance and make as much profit as possible. This guy is more like green and tries to create companies that are friendly for people. So what he describes is that organizations have evolved over the last few centuries through several stages. And I won't describe all of them, but most organizations today are what he calls in the orange paradigm, the middle one. So it's about KPIs, making profit, it's about innovation. It's kind of a top-down, hierarchical company, like a bank or an insurance, like how banks and insurance companies usually work nowadays. The green one is kind of the next evolution, so that's more like Ben & Jerry's or Greenpeace. So people join that company because they have a passion to change the world. They want to improve something, and that's why they get together as a family. And what he names Teal is kind of a living organism. So that's the organization of the future that he describes. And Teal has kind of three main principles. So first one is self-management. Maybe you have read the book, right? Oh, you haven't read the book. Can you explain like self-management? How to get there. Yes, yeah. So kind of like how Scrum team works, so the product owner setting the direction, like what to build, but how to build it is up to the team. So he has a lot of terms that he describes in the book, but I'm not going to describe all of that. I think self-management for me is mainly summarized as going from a command and control hierarchical way of organizing work, like the orange paradigm, towards self-organization, where people take more accountability and have more freedom to execute things as they see fit. So that's the first pillar of a Teal organization. The second one is what he calls wholeness. Can you give it a shot? No. So I think for me this part of the book is where it becomes a little bit soft. So he talks a lot about like meditation and yoga, and for me it's like I'm still thinking, I think most people would not have the job or not work as much in their job if they were given a choice. If I pay you guys $1 million, it's very unlikely that you're going to stay in the job where you are. Am I right? Right. I see some yes. For the other ones, it's very good. But what he's saying is that in companies of the future, we try to move from this idea of having a work-life balance to one life. Yeah? So in the job, I find my passion, I find my dreams, I can do yoga, I can do meditation and everything. Yeah? So some of the things that he describes don't attract me personally, but I do think that idea of creating a company that has an environment that makes people want to stay and want to work is quite good. Because I think in most organizations, people work because they have to earn money, right? That's one of the primary reasons. The third pillar is what he calls evolutionary purpose. And I think it's best described as going from military plans to what he calls sense and respond. So he's saying that in certain goals or things that we want to execute in the company, instead of making military plans with 3 or 5 year goals and then action steps of how to get there, we try to make it more agile, we try to make it more open, and we try to accommodate change. And he even says that the sort of purpose of a company can also change. So depending on the time we're operating in, or the industry, or the people that we hire, we could change direction. So if we're an insurance company, maybe we start building, some apps, which is kind of deviating from our core purpose. But he's saying, okay, for a Teal organization, that's okay, because if the people within the company sense that that's the right thing to do, they should have an opportunity to do this. And I think that's quite an interesting concept. Now, I think for an existing organization, let's say a bank with like 20,000 employees, it might be a bit challenging, but if you're building a new organization, I think this principle can still be built into the DNA of the company. At least it's easier in an evolving organization. You have a question? No. You're still awake, huh? Interesting what? Indicator. If you're awake, yeah, he starts falling asleep. So I tried to use a lot of these principles in the new company that I created, Ekipa. So since 2 years, I copy-pasted a lot of the stuff that he has in the website or in the book. So he's got a website, his book is even open. You can just see it on the site. I think it's like reinventingorganizations.org. The whole book is open, and he made a lot of principles that you can actually apply in the company. So some of it is kind of copy-paste, some of it is customized for the team. So what I tried to do with Ekipa around hierarchy is to give all the power to the teams. So as I said in the beginning, I'm kind of a lazy entrepreneur, so I don't want to be a boss. So I tried to make a system where I don't need to take any decisions. Because I think that's eventually what a boss does. He tries to solve problems for other people. He tries to control what other people are doing. And he tries to resolve the problems that people have. So in a bossless organization, all the power should be with the teams and they can decide on everything. And as you just said, the teams need to find out how am I going to accomplish the goals that I set out as a team. How am I going to get there and how am I going to be accountable to get there. So we made a specific process around decision making. So first of all, I have all the information open. So we have like a Google sheet with all the salaries in it, with all the profit and loss, so anybody can see any number. If they want to see what the profit last month was, they can see it. If they want to know what my salary is, they can see it. Right? So all open. And we made a specific agreement on how to make decisions. Because if, like in a normal organization, most decisions will be taken by a boss. Right? So if somebody says, okay, I want to go, let's say, to a conference in Singapore, you would need to go to somebody to ask for approval, right? Did anybody need to do that in this case? Right. But if you don't have a boss, then you need to decide by yourself. So you need to kind of have rules to make sure that the decision can be made. So what we agreed is that every decision that has to be, so if I as a co-worker in the company recognize that a decision needs to be made, for example, do I want to go to a conference in Singapore, then I'm the person who has to take that decision as well. And if I'm in doubt, then I can use the advice process. So I can ask 1 or 2 colleagues, what do you think? Should I spend 500 Singapore dollars plus a flight plus a hotel to go to this conference, or should I not do that? And if the colleagues give him some advice, and he could use that, but ultimately the decision is with the person that wants to go to that conference. So that kind of, yeah. Yes. Say again? There? Yes. Well, so salary system, I'll show how we... So what I tried first is what Lalou also described, self-setting of salaries. So if you're in my team, you can decide your own salary. And I don't know how other companies do that, but it didn't work for us. So last year, what happened was, there was only a small team, so we had like 5, 6 people. But one of the guys who started 2 years ago, he said, you know, I contributed so much that I think I need a like 80% salary increment. So what I had invented is, okay, people, if they want to get a salary appraisal, they need to write an application letter to the team. So they have to describe, okay, I've contributed this and this, these are my KPIs, this is what I contributed, and so I think that I need to get 80% extra. And then if the people can give him feedback, and he could use that feedback to do something with this, to lower it from 80 to 50, or he could just decide, I don't care, I just take 80%. And one guy did that, so I think he went to 60% or something, but he took a big raise, and then the next one also said, I want extra. And I thought, okay, that's not good, because if that continues, then everybody's going to do that. So then we discussed within the team, how can we solve this? I don't know. There's like one big example is Semco, and they do this for, I don't know, 2 decades. And I don't know how they do it, but apparently it can work, but I haven't figured out how. Because I think some people will always try to get the maximum, right, no matter what. So then we decided as a team, okay, we need to change something, because if we keep this system, then it's going to grow through the roof. And we agreed, okay, everybody will get a base salary. So there's like a base salary for Agile coaches, and then there's a base salary for Scrum Masters. And most of the people that we hire are in those 2 categories, because I don't want to hire too many people outside the core service that we deliver to clients. So that base salary is there, and then they get 10% of... Say again? Yeah. Yes, yes. So there are still some exceptions, I think, because sometimes when we hire new people, we try to first do, like for 3 months, we base it on what they demand. So if their demand is lower than what we have in our system, we might go with the salary that he asks for. And then after the 3 months, if all is good and he gets a permanent contract, then he moves to the higher salary. Just to keep it a bit like... Say again? No, because if I allow one guy to earn more, then the whole team starts complaining. So that base salary is there, and then 10%, they get 10% of the money that we invoice to the client. They get a cut of that, which is good because they can earn, like if the client is satisfied and they get a good rate from the client, then they benefit from this. And the additional incentive that I already noticed is that people have an incentive to start finding new clients. So if they're on the bench, they have no client, suddenly they start talking to other clients and they say, yeah, I have a proposal out there. Like last week it happened, there was a prospective client in Jakarta who tried to shoot some emails in LinkedIn to 3 of our coaches because they thought, okay, we can just steal the coach from Ekipa. And sort of all 3 of them unanimously wrote back like, we're not interested in joining, but we can have a sales talk with you and then we can present how Ekipa can help you. So I think this is also because first of all, they like to work in the company, and second of all, because they have an incentive to kind of get the work so that they can earn the 10% commission. No, so that's an issue. So the funny thing is, we had the discussion with the whole group, and I think there were about 12 people at that time. One guy is also Dutch and my age, and he lives in Indonesia since like 5 years. And there's an Australian guy who was an Agile coach in Australia, so he was a freelancer, so his income was pretty steep compared to Indonesia. And then he moved to Jakarta because he wanted to work there. So we had the discussion, and I felt those 2 guys actually had to earn more, but they wanted to make it like the same for everyone, because some of the older guys, like the guys that were in the team for a longer time, Indonesians, they wanted to keep it equal. So they said, you know, you're from Australia, but you want to come here, so you have to kind of go down. And they agreed, so they all earn the same. However, to the client, we can charge more for this Australian guy, right? So in the end, he will earn a little bit more, but not much more. So the Dutch kind of, so right now we start the discussion also because I try to encourage them to kind of start reshaping the system so those 2 guys will earn more because they're like 40 and 52 or something, and they earn the same as a 28-year-old Indonesian guy, which makes no sense to me, but they agreed on it. So I kind of let it go for the time being, and they're still there. Not yet. No, so that's where we started. So I made like a junior coach, media coach, senior coach, and what immediately happened was guys started saying, I'm senior, I'm senior, I'm senior. So I said, okay, let's abandon that system for now and go to one category, and then everybody agreed. Because even if you, like, actually there were the 2 people who also asked for a salary increment, like the guy who asked 80% extra, and they said, you know, I'm not a media. In the category, based on X years experience, he would be a media coach, but he was claiming I'm a senior because I'm the most experienced guy in the team right now. So when I created this system, I really wanted to make something which is kind of agreed by everyone, and you don't have discussion about this is what I should get and this is what I should get. So right now with the senior guys, if they want to increase their salary, they have to create a sort of revamp of the system, and they have to sell it to all the other ones. Yeah? So they should get a buy-in. So they don't come to me, I'm not going to make the decision, but they discuss with the others, like, okay, based on, we made some rough calculation, like I have, 20 years experience, and so my base salary should be a little bit more than the other ones based on a calculation, so that it becomes fair. I just saw we have only 5 minutes left. Does anybody have like a question that you really want to have answered before we leave?
It's not a question. If you want to look at our data is good, we have a sort of calculation of that. There was a compound sort of calculation. The same what we experienced.
Similar. Okay, that's a good one. Buffer. Let me see which one. Yeah, I think maybe to wrap it up, I think one of the most important things is to also create a system of accountability, because I noticed that, so in the talk that Charles gave before, he kind of said, okay, if we give people freedom to ask for reimbursements, whatever they see fit, if we give people freedom to come to office whenever they want, his office is also in Indonesia, it doesn't work. That's what he kind of concluded. And I still believe it does work, but you need to find the right balance between freedom and accountability. Right? So if you give people freedom, which I think is best for anyone, they should also show that they can be accountable. Yeah? They take accountability for the performance that they have. And they don't stay in bed till 11 every day, doing nothing, contributing nothing, or less than they should, but they show that they can contribute. And I think to get there, you need to kind of find out a system that makes people accountable. So we tried several iterations, and what we have come up with now is this one. So we have like client teams working for a customer, and then every client team has an executive coach and a set of agile coaches helping the teams. As long as people are in the client-facing roles, it's fairly easy. They will take accountability because they know if I go to the client needs to be satisfied, otherwise they won't extend the contract, and it will affect my 10%. So that's kind of a simple accountability system. But we also want to grow the company, so we don't have marketing and salespeople, we don't have recruiters, we don't have HR, only one lady for finance, because I think finance should always be there. You cannot just leave that up to an agile coach who is doing other stuff. But for all the other topics that we have in the company, we came up with what we call chapters. We started that in the beginning of the year. So I can, based on what we need, so for example, last quarter we were still hiring some people, so we had a recruitment chapter. But this quarter we don't have that anymore because we have a small decline, so marketing and sales becomes more important. So then each chapter says, okay, we need to, like we say, for the company, we want to achieve this in the next quarter, mainly getting new clients. And then chapters are formed and they decide on their OKRs, objective key results. So they set their own goals and the steps on how to accomplish those goals. And they are responsible for making sure that this happens, and they contribute to the overall company goal. And each chapter has a chapter lead. And that lead is responsible for making sure that within the chapter, the OKRs are achieved. So he's not really a boss, but he is responsible for making it happen. So what we tried now is every 2 weeks, the chapter leads have a meeting together with me. And what I told them is, right now, I want to be in that meeting, not to control people, but more to indicate whether I'm comfortable or not. I think that I just give them feedback. I'm comfortable, I'm a little bit comfortable, I'm uncomfortable, and then I give them details why that is so that they have an idea of how they are doing within that chapter. So every 2 weeks they share like the OKR sheet, they update what they have accomplished, and we can also see in a dashboard like what percentage of the OKRs they have accomplished to create this alignment and to make sure that things move forward. So this is kind of the way to, and so far it works. So I'm not sure if in 3 or 4 months I will still have the same story, but so far it works, and it avoids having separate people for sales, separate people for marketing, while you have expensive coaches on the bench doing nothing. I didn't get it. You mean? What do you mean by other teams? Yes. Oh yeah, so for example, the sales chapter they have, sales is always easy to measure, but yeah. So marketing, for example, said, okay, this quarter we're gonna have a couple of events that we organize in Jakarta. And to organize those events, we start running Instagram apps, Facebook apps, we start inviting chief transformation officers, CIOs, etc. And they say, okay, we invite X people for the event per week. So they have some clear measurable goals to accomplish that. And every 2 weeks they update that in this chapter lead. I saw a note rounding up, so I don't know if anybody else has more questions. So in Ekipa, I don't. Yeah, it doesn't really pop up. So what happened, for example, a few weeks ago, we were starting a transformation for a Commonwealth Bank in Jakarta, and then I had in mind, okay, the team that worked for another insurance company could actually go to Commonwealth to start the transformation there. And one of the guys said, Hugo, I would like to have, I don't want TJ in my team, but I would like to have a gang in my team. I said, okay, that's fine. I mean, I was... Did I? Well, I think it kind of, I told him it's fine, and then I started thinking, okay, how should I explain that to TJ? But she never raised the question, so it never really became a problem. It worked. And a few months ago, there was one guy who was actually working for Online Pajak, and he wanted to leave our company. He got a better job offer. So I thought, okay, let's have a lunch with them to see what happened. And then 2 of my colleagues joined, and they were actually the ones trying to keep him on board. So I was kind of surprised because they started selling him like, why are you leaving? And these opportunities, and okay, that's great. And he stayed. So I didn't have to do anything. So I think in general, conflict is not something that, at least I don't see it happen yet. And people could also join not to work together, right? On the client teams, they have an influence because they could say, okay, I would prefer to work for another client, and then we can listen to that, see how we can shape it. And in the chapters, it's kind of easier because people volunteer to join a certain chapter. They're not forced to join anything. It's the end, I just see. Okay, so I'll put up this slide. Oh yeah, I think the feedback form is also on the wall. So to give feedback on the session, you can scan this one or on the wall. And then you can also scan this one for the slide deck or for our sort of manifesto. If anybody wants certain questions still to be answered, please give me your card, and maybe you can send the email with the questions, and I'll try to answer those. One guy fell asleep, so I did something wrong. But in general, I think we did okay with the beanbags. So thanks.